Hi, you're listening to It Happened to Me, a rare disease and medical challenges podcast. The mission of our podcast is to support you, our listeners, and to create community as you confront the toughest challenges in life. All of us will experience health hardships. The real question is how we adapt. That's the focus of It Happened to Me, which wants to help you overcome limitations and live a full and satisfying life. Drawing on their own health challenges, co-hosts Cathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman interview guests who share stories and research to help you succeed in the face of difficult health obstacles. It happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.
In this episode, we are joined by Nikki McIntosh, a rare disease advocate, writer, and mother whose life was forever changed when her son was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. What began as a devastating diagnosis turned into a mission of empowerment, advocacy, and building community for other parents navigating similar challenges. Nikki brings more than a decade of life experience as a rare mama and has transformed her family's journey into a source of guidance and strength for others.
Her debut book, Rare Mamas: Empowering Strategies for Navigating Your Child's Rare Disease, offers practical tools, resources, and emotional support for parents raising children with rare diseases. In this conversation, we'll talk about Nikki's personal story, the realities of parenting a child with SMA, and the hope, humor, and resilience she offers through her advocacy. Welcome to the show, Nikki. And now let's start at the very beginning. Can you share how your family's story started in the rare disease community?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me, Beth and Cathy. So my story started back in 2013 when my son was diagnosed with a rare neuromuscular disease called Spinal Muscular Atrophy, or SMA for short. That was our entry into this whole rare world that we now live in.
So now I'm going to ask you a really tough question. You received a difficult diagnosis. Can you tell us what that was like?
It was devastating, to say the least. At the time of diagnosis, we were told that SMA was degenerative. There was no treatment. There was no cure. And that it was the leading genetic cause of infant death.
Oh my goodness.
Our world was turned upside down.
Yeah.
It felt like pretty much the worst news you could hear as a parent.
Of course. Now, for listeners who may not know what SMA is, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, SMA is like I mentioned, rare neuromuscular disease that robs people of their ability that causes muscle weakness and robs people of their ability to walk, eat, and even breathe. The severity depends. Each person has a different level of severity. No two people's case unfolds the same. So there's a lot of unknown, and there's a lot of kind of wait and see, I would say, with this disease.
How old was your son?
He was 18 months old at the time of diagnosis.
Oh, wow. And what were the first signs or symptoms that made you realize that something just wasn't right?
Yeah, so he hit all of his milestones until it came time to pull to stand and take steps, those first steps. We have an older son, my son Mason, who was 2 at the time. And so we knew what those milestones were. And when Miles, my younger son, started missing those milestones, we felt like something was going on. We took him to see our pediatrician. We mentioned to our pediatrician at the time, and those concerns were repeatedly dismissed. So there came a point where we decided to take our son to see a neurologist because we just felt like something bigger was going on.
Wow.
How did you think of a neurologist?
So at the time when we were sharing our concerns with our pediatrician, we were told that we could see a neurologist, but if we saw a neurologist, most likely they were going to tell us to go do physical therapy first. So why don't we go do physical therapy first?
I see.
That was
Wow.
the advice we were given at the time. And we did start some physical therapy. And I would say after about a month, we were just racking our brains, as was the physical therapist, as to why our son wasn't seeing any progress. And at that point, we just decided we're not going to wait any longer. We're going to take him to see a
Uh-huh.
neurologist.
You know, it's remarkable how every infant hits, when you talk about hits these milestones, and they all do it at about the same time. This is something innate, something we can't teach them, but something they all do. And so at a certain point, you know that maybe they're a little late. But what was said to you, I think, is not atypical, that your doctor is saying, well, it's no big deal. And you
Yes.
really took it upon yourself to get more answers, which was gutsy and difficult.
Well, unfortunately, I wish that story was uncommon. But now that I live in this rare disease world, I realize how common that is. Not just rare diseases, a lot of medical conditions, right? For us
Yes,
to be
yes,
dismissed or, misunderstood or misdiagnosed or going without a diagnosis for a long period of time. It's more common, and unfortunately, than we would hope.
yes.
And
Doctors seem to dismiss us for some reason. Um, this instinct that a parent has that there's something not quite right, and it's dismissed. And it really does show you've got to be your child's advocate and to listen to that inner voice.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
I will say that is probably where a lot of our parental advocacy begins, maybe even.
how did you talk about turning devastation into advocacy? How did you do that? What helped you make that shift in your mindset?
I think, it was instinctual. I think as it is for many parents who just want to do what's right for their child and want the best for their child, and they want to speak on their child's behalf. So I think there's some instinctual, guttural response of, I must save my child. I must help my child.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that love, that fierce love you have really empowers you and gives you those abilities to maybe raise up and get gutsy, as you said, or, speak up or challenge experts in a way that perhaps you wouldn't have done, or wouldn't have thought you could do. But out of that love and that desperate place of just wanting to purely help your child, that advocate is born.
You
Wow.
know, to me, now the biggest question is, now you know that you have a diagnosis, and how do you put a team together? This is a group of people that you will rely on, that will listen to you. How do you go about doing that?
Well, how I go about it now is so different than I thought,
Uh-huh.
that you go about it, right?
Mm.
I've learned over time, and I talk about this now to as many parents as I can, that really you're going to be really strategic about it. You're going to do a lot of research. We want to do a lot of research, and we want to
Mm-hmm.
chase down and track down the best, most proficient players in
Yes.
that area of medicine. So, for example, my child's diagnosis is neuromuscular, and the specialist that oversees his care and oversees the team is a neurologist. So, in past, I might have thought I need a neurologist. I'll just call the closest one in proximity, the first one I can
Sure.
get in to see.
Right.
Yes.
I think perhaps that's a common way to choose your specialist or your doctor, your physician, your
Well, there
provider.
probably not a whole lot of pediatric neurologists around.
Well, and that can vary, right? Based on where you
Yes,
live, that
where
can
you
vary
live.
great. Fortunately for us, we actually do have a choice. We have quite a few children's hospitals in our
Uh-huh.
area. Yes. And so we're fortunate in that way that we actually could choose. And so when we learned this was a neuromuscular disease, we looked into and researched what is the best neuromuscular department, where are the top neurologists at. And one thing I'll say that I learned is oftentimes you'll find these top players, these tertiary centers, these hospitals will be affiliated with teaching hospitals, with research
Very
departments.
good point.
Right. Yeah.
Very good
Yeah.
point.
And they seem to have their finger on the pulse of the latest and greatest
Mm-hmm.
research. And so that's what we want. We want to drive further if we need to, and which is what we did in our
Mm.
case. That we passed up the hospital, the children's hospital closest to us, to go to the one that was further away, that had that department, that was a robust neuromuscular disease department, that had really talented neurologists that were also associated with these teaching hospitals. And so they
That was a
really,
smart decision.
yeah,
Very
it
smart.
was a learning, and that's now how we approach all of my son's care, and to assemble that team to make sure each piece, each player in that on that team is a really proficient in their area of expertise. And they
Wow.
know the latest and greatest of what's going on, the latest care practices for my child's disease. And they're being advised and taking input from the medical advisory board for the spinal muscular atrophy patient group, for example. So yes, we've learned some strategies along the way of how to assemble this really, really specialized team.
And that's so pivotal. It's wonderful
You know,
that you're really
you
learning the best way to do that.
You said something that I think is really important to bring out when you talked about the term teaching hospital. I think there is some negative association with that. And I'm glad that you are dispelling it, because it seems that great doctors gravitate toward these teaching centers where these doctors are training young people, and it's not an infringement on your privacy or your child's privacy, but actually you have to think about it in a different way, that you're helping train future specialists, and really these doctors are top in their field. Your thoughts?
I wholeheartedly agree. They are passionate, usually very passionate
Yes.
about their work. They're passionate about their patients and finding solutions and treatments, and therefore they are actively participating in research. They're plugged in often with
Mm,
the disease patient
yeah.
advocacy groups, the biotech companies that are interested in, that particular disease.
Speaking of all this, your son Miles was in a clinical trial. And how was that experience? What was the outcome?
Yes, he was in a clinical trial when he was just shy of 3 years old. He was enrolled in a clinical trial that went on to become the first ever FDA approved treatment for SMA,
Oh,
which is
beautiful.
called
Great.
now known as Spinraza.
Was your son given a placebo or the Spinraza?
Well, I don't know if we'll ever know the definitive answer to
Mhm.
that,
Uh-huh.
but we're pretty certain he was given the
The
actual
Spinraza, because you've seen a real
treatment.
difference in your
Yes.
son.
Yes, we
That's
were,
beautiful.
the effects were profound, and we noticed them pretty early on.
Congratulations.
And
Thank you.
once again, this idea of enrolling in a clinical trial, that this can be so life altering, that clinical trial, the drug that's being tested, became state of the art, and your son had the benefit of it.
Yes, for years before it was, available. And it was, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a very hard decision, a very big decision.
It is a big decision, and a
Yeah.
lot of paperwork and time goes into participating in a clinical trial. So I know that had to have been a difficult decision.
It was a big decision, and it's pretty weighty when you're making a decision like that on behalf of somebody else who doesn't,
Yes.
who's a child that can't have a say in it at the time. Fortunately for our family, the outcome was exactly what we had
Wonderful.
hoped.
Yeah.
So now you have created resources for other parents who are going through this journey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, when my son was diagnosed, my eyes were open to the glaring gaps of information for rare disease patients and families like ours. And as I mentioned, we were fortunate to be plugged into a really robust patient advocacy group that was doing
Wonderful.
critical work for our child's disease. But we quickly learned that not all patients had the benefit of that. 50% of rare diseases do not have a patient advocacy group. And a lot of these diseases are ultra rare. And so these parents and these families are walking this unknown path without a safety net, without the supports in place. And even though our children's diagnoses may be different in the rare disease world, there are a lot of similarities in what we experience or what we face. And so I think the learnings can be translated. And so I just felt so passionate about trying to help use what I've learned, all the obstacles I bumped into, all the challenges, all the things I had to figure out along the way. I wanted to give those tools to a parent that was starting out, to save them time, to save them energy, to save them perhaps hitting some of those roadblocks, or maybe at least prepare them mentally for what's ahead and what's to come. And it's been one of the most meaningful pieces of my story.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
just so our audience knows, please check the show notes to this episode, because there'll be all sorts of links to the resources that both Nikki provides herself and to the resources that Nikki's referring to that helped her in her journey. So
Yes.
please be sure and check the show notes, whatever your rare is.
Exactly.
Yes.
And Rare Mamas is my resource. It's called Rare Mamas.
Yes.
So
Nikki, was this an online support group?
yeah, so basically it's
Yes.
a resource in the way of content. So I have it was initially a blog where I was sharing different, learnings on different topics. I have a podcast called Rare Mamas Rising, and now I have a book with all the learnings.
Congratulations. Congratulations
And
on each
what-
one of these endeavors.
Absolutely.
Thank
But
you.
what role has the rare disease community played in your journey?
Oh, it's been such a big piece of my journey, and that's probably why I feel so passionate about giving back to this community, because when I plugged into the rare disease community, first the SMA community, which was welcoming, open arms, amazing parents that were so helpful with the day-to-day learnings that I needed to help my son. And then my eyes were open to this bigger rare disease community. And this group is they're so passionate. They're, tenacious go-getters, that are starting organizations and nonprofits to help, in their specific disease group, or championing legislation on Capitol Hill to change policies for rare disease patients, biotech companies that are, supporting our community. It's such a great resource for families like ours, and even more so just the people within it are just tremendous, and that gives us such a sense of connection and really helps fight against those feelings of isolation that rare parents can, and rare families and rare patients can feel initially when they get a rare diagnosis.
And did your advocacy help you in meeting those challenges, the isolation and the whole sense of forlorn? I mean, did it help to have
Yes.
something that you could really turn to, that you could on some level control in
That's
such an
exactly it.
uncontrollable situation?
You hit it on the head. That was exactly it for me personally. Was, these diseases, any diagnosis can leave you feeling so powerless. And the advocacy piece is kind of a way it felt for me to take back some semblance of control and do what I could in a proactive way. It was a place to put my angst and my anxiety and my fear and channel it to something positive, and to feel like I was part of the solution. And it also allowed me to align with these other like-minded individuals that were doing the same.
Congratulations. That's beautiful. Now, one of the biggest challenges for parents is navigating complex medical systems, and the rare community is full of that. What
Yes.
strategies helped you most in advocating for your son's care?
Yes, thank you for asking. That is one of the biggest challenges we face, for certain. So I think one of them, which we already talked about, was really doing your research and finding that expert care team up front and assembling them strategically. That's one of the biggest pieces, I would say. Another piece, I would say, a strategy, is to recognize that we as parents are part of that team, that medical team. And while we don't have medical backgrounds and we don't bring medical expertise, what we bring is the expertise of our child. And so we're bringing that knowledge to the table. And one of the things to take it a little bit further in a really tactical strategy is that we can track information on our kids. We can track health information, observations, symptoms, and we can do this really like a data collection, basically, as a way to bring that to these meetings with our providers. They're not with us, obviously, every minute of every day to see the full picture of our child. So sometimes there can be gaps in information. We can fill in those gaps for them. Because, it's Murphy's Law that we're going to wait 3 months for this specialist appointment.
Right.
We're going to get there that day, and the symptom that we've been worried about is not going to be present.
So true.
Yeah. So, because of that, we can at home be videoing and bringing that information. We can be tracking symptoms and data, and that can really help over time give a picture of our child.
What a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that everyone should think of as a wonderful tool for really visualizing and showing what's going on to the doctor, to the provider, so that they can give the best insight, even if it is the day that it's not showing up in person.
Yep, that's happened too many times, so we've learned the hard way.
Well, Nikki, let's talk about you as a provider, and what is it like for you to take care of your son on a day-to-day basis? What is involved in his care?
So now my son Miles is 13, so he's a little bit
Oh,
older
wow.
now. Yeah, so we've reached this, kind of pivotal point where he is longing for independence, right? He's having these typical rites of passage of becoming a teenager, and his disease does not affect his cognition, so he is aware and he is all teenager. Yeah. But he is in a wheelchair, and so it involves, sometimes it involves transfers. Sometimes it involves, physically doing things for him that he's not able to do. Yeah, there's still a lot of caretaking that we're doing as for a teen that is not typical that you would do for someone at that age, right? We're still helping with, acts of daily living, hygiene and different things that nature. And then I would say, also transitioning to try and help him learn how to advocate for himself and how to learn how to try and do some of these things independently for himself. So we're at this interesting stage
of balancing.
Yes, of balancing that. Yeah.
Wow. And
Well,
how are his friends? Do they respect his needs and kind of go with the flow anyways? How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, he's so fortunate. He has an awesome group of friends, and he's
That's
had
beautiful.
for years, and they really do support him and treat him just like anybody else, which is what he wants, and he's got a feisty little funny personality, so I think he kind of maybe gets under your skin a little bit where can't help but maybe want to help him. So yeah, he's fortunate in that way. He's got a great source of.
And how's your older son with him?
My older son. He has the biggest heart. They are really a good little team. They're very opposite personalities, but they work really well together. And I think it's because, my older son is all heart. Miles is all feisty, bossy. Thankfully, he's got a very kind big brother that just kind of understands.
Now, tell us about your debut book, Rare Mamas, Empowering Strategies for Navigating Your Child's Rare Disease. I love the name. What do you hope parents feel or take away after reading your book?
I hope that parents feel a couple things. I want them to feel I think most importantly, I want them to feel two things, I should say, equally important. Empowered, meaning they feel capable. And so that's why the book has a lot of strategies like the strategies we're talking about, to how to kind of just approach things to make them more effective and more efficient. So it has those strategies so that these parents can go in feeling empowered, like they know what to do, they're capable, they're able to do it. I want them to feel a sense of hope. We get these diagnoses, we're told things that maybe leave us feeling like there is no reason for hope or that we should forego hope. And I believe that we should never forego hope and we should keep hope alive. And that really allows us to keep ourselves open to possibilities and to chase down new leads and new avenues for these diseases and for our children. And that's exactly what we need to do.
So beautiful.
It's beautiful.
That's
beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Nikki, thank you. Thank you for coming on It Happened to Me. Thank you for sharing your story and your journey. And your story and your advocacy and response is inspirational. And I love the concept of it really helping you control an uncontrollable situation. And thank you for teaching us about SMA. And we hope listeners will join us in reading your book, and make sure listeners to please read the show notes so that you can get the links to the fabulous resources that Nikki has been telling us all about. And again, the name of the book is Rare Mamas: Empowering Strategies for Navigating Your Child's Rare Disease. Thank you, Nikki. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for all the work and advocacy you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of It Happened to Me. We encourage you to learn more at ithappenedtomepod.com. Please use the contact form on our website to submit your guest suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, and feedback for the show. You can also email us directly at ithappenedtomepod@gmail.com. We would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app like Apple or Spotify. This helps others in the rare disease and medical challenge community find us. It Happened to Me is created and hosted by Cathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman. I'm Keir Deneen from DNA Today, and I serve as our executive producer and marketing lead. Amanda Andrioli is our associate producer. Ashlyn Anokian is our graphic designer. And remember, it happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.